noble citizens, we must bypass a life of dormancy and vice to pursue the generative endeavor of a hard day's work. The benefits of these pursuits are not secured by chance or charity, but through the merit of your character and the firmness of your convictions. It is you who are planting the seeds of trees whose shade you know you shall never see.
All right, what's up? We're in. We're stealing time because there's my dog. Right now, I mean, I came back with 3. Dude, we're trying to. All of a sudden, they're wanting to do this. My in-laws want to do a deck, like build a bunch of pavers in, and then they're like, "Oh, we need to rent an excavator for this." And I'm like, "What the like,
at your home?"
No. Yeah, and I'm like,
wow. Well,
I don't know. So
they're up. They want to do a deck.
Build pavers in. I mean, this isn't great content, but I'm basically they're off talking to Home Depot about renting an excavator the day before Christmas Eve, which just seems nuts. It's like,
Wow.
That's what they want to do, and we have.
Is it a gift from
them?
We have
so much to talk about. Yeah, that's kind of their thinking. Awesome. They just can't stop, won't stop. It's that good old proletarian work ethic that sometimes even can be too much. But
can't stop, won't stop.
Can't stop, won't stop.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah, we got so much to talk about. We're probably not going to get through everything. Yeah, and you made a great outline, my friend. I did look at it too, and I think a good overall theme, no matter what we don't reach, is political violence, and and all of these opinions being had on it, and how ridiculous so many of them are. Because guess what? Violence is politics. Politics is violence. They're inseparable.
It's true. I think one thing to think about is how elections are really like a form of soft reform, and so it at the end of the day, it really is violent. And I think there's an element to that, especially with this new incoming administration, which I think is a major part of the news cycle right now, the incoming administration. And they're making no illusions about it. Like when one new administration comes in, they have the right to do whatever they want and to kick out the other administration. And we, as Americans, tend to fantasize about our institutions in a way with checks and balances and things like that, as if there's a certain way that you're not supposed to do something. But I think that's really a denial at the heart of really what a state is, as we've talked about, that the purpose of a state is really, I say it all the time, and it might as well be a major theme of the episodes. The purpose of a state is to redirect resources wherever influence concentrates.
Right, exactly. And I think another thing, though, too, that is sort of important to mention when you say something like soft reform, and it's a great segue to this, is that, like, any bureaucratic process, any democratic process, there is a real sense to which that is a sublimation of violence, too. And that's one of those things that I think, libertarians are generally sickos, but that's one point that they have and are generally correct on. And all of this is segueing to a bit I wanted to do that I thought you'd find funny, which is, we're both, I'd say principled Marxist-Leninist thinkers, at least like, in our most self-aggrandizing self-conceptions. But I do think all of us got to give it up a little bit to the whole anarchist idea of propaganda of the deed.
Oh, absolutely.
Dear God. Dear God. Like, this is...
Man, this really is a big win for propaganda of the deed.
It rocks that this is the most Italian-esque kid. It's like history just being hilarious and rhyming, but also like...
Yeah, it's true.
It's a nice little Christmas present for socialism. It really is.
I guess more for anarchism in America.
Right? Anarchists, and anarchists, absolutely, they're in on that too, because, like I said, propaganda of the deed, it's...
Yeah, and a major element of this upcoming episode, I think, that we're going to bring up, too, is the equating of violence on both sides, or, like Operation Gladio, as we're working on our own episode of Italian history at some point.
Watch this space.
Just the idea of... We're going to have to watch this space, of violence being blamed on left-wing extremism. And we're going to have to...
Which Luigi Mangione was not.
Yeah, absolutely not.
Yeah. And none of the shooters have been. There's really been like zero, especially the ones who shot at Trump, like this most recent school shooter in Wisconsin. Like they're not left-wingers.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Neither of the Trump assassination attempts were left-wing. Luigi Mangione is not really left-wing. And yet we're still going to always see the attacks on left-wing violence and the equating of both sides, especially as we are really reaching a new level of fascism. And that is really just part of the modus operandi of what fascism does. Is it's going to gaslight you and tell you that leftist violence is a serious problem, even though we can't really think of many stories of it. And Oh, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, I always think it's worth reflecting on the inherently paranoid nature of the fascist worldview. And like, there's good reason for that. And they always need to be, because their whole political project is inherently fragile and internally contradictory and unsustainable. But I also think one other theme I want to make sure to plug in there that's just the most simple one and quick is Bernie would won. Also,
absolutely. That's going to be a major theme in the upcoming clips anymore from this episode. No question. So, there's a bunch of fascists who have admitted, and they're like basically spiking the ball in the end zone, saying, haha, you idiots fell for it. If you had Bernie, you would have won. Yeah. There's a video of Charlie Kirk.
So let's rip through this outline you have here. Give me all the points. I think, honestly, I'm inclined to skip right to Trump's response to the Luigi Mangione thing, because I didn't know he'd even gotten that out yet.
I think the very first one that I was planning to do was going to be the Seltzer lawsuit, which is meant to send a shockwave across the whole media landscape, and we're definitely seeing that it is. There's this lawsuit that Trump is using right now on one of the leading pollsters, the Seltzer polls, which you've probably heard of. And when
did that break?
This was December 21st. I've got a video here from MSNBC which neither of us are really a fan of that network, but oftentimes the only way that we're going to be able to show things is going to be through clips on legacy media. So this is from, I think, the Ari Melber show. I'll play this clip right now. And again, the purpose of this is fascism that we're seeing as the administration is coming in. And the purpose is to send a chilling effect. And they talk about how it's not just one lawsuit. It's many lawsuits that are upcoming, meant to send a chilling effect. And I think that the capitulation of even the so-called democratic media that we're seeing, and that we're going to have several clips to point out moving forward, these are all basically showcasing this general theme that the news is afraid of legal liability, which is the major reason why they're capitulating. And this is a pattern that I want to talk about that is just inherent to privately owned media. That if the ownership of the media is all private, then there is always going to be this inherent concern of lawsuits. Now, we had previously lived through an era where the Supreme Court was going to rule in favor of truth in journalism still. Now, we've had the decay of it through some major historic legal changes.
The Republican Party's, project coming to fruition, more or less, incomplete.
Yeah, their project coming to fruition, Reagan and the repeal of the Fairness Doctrine's a major one.
Yeah. The nightmare scenario we were taught about as kids, truly, from the democratic worldview. Like, they've won.
So we're here.
Yeah.
We're here. It's fully unraveled. And what we have is fascist news that the truth is literally illegal, and that is the concern. So the major news networks are now, just like they did prior to the rise of fascism in Germany and Italy in the 20th century, the news capitulates, and especially the for-profit news. In the wake of the Great Recession, there was a massive rise in the price of ink and paper. Yeah. And therefore, most socialist news and news that had actual journalists who were going out on the ground, they lost all their funding. They were running on razor thin margins. And ultimately, we saw it in 2018 or around then, the Wall Street Journal during Trump's administration had said, "Democracy dies in darkness," was a famous quote that the so-called liberal media said. And it's kind of echoing the past that it doesn't really work that way. Democracy actually seems to die with bright lights shining all the time. Like
democracy can die in a very well illuminated space, actually.
Yeah, democracy dies in a very well illuminated space while we're all watching it happen. And really, the issue is the for-profit structure of media, that as soon as the top courts rule that the truth is illegal, we're going to continue to see mainstream for-profit news capitulate to Donald Trump and fascism.
Yeah.
And that's why this administration is going to be different than Trump's first term due to the legal change.
I think that's very true and very concerning. Yeah. And
I think the changing legal landscape, that it's solidified now that it's Trump's legal system, and the news has to work around that instead of Trump being an outsider to a legal system in the first term.
Yeah, they just got cucked incredibly hard, and to a degree it is a real breakdown of the consent manufacturing machinery of the United States, which is like that. There's unequivocal goods to be found in that, but it is like a very frightening moment considering that like they are unchained and unbound and ready to break whatever doors they need to like, I mean, I also want to move on to, I mean, it's just breakdown of rule of law.
Yeah, it's a breakdown of the liberal institutions, the rule of law.
Like complete and total breakdown of the liberal institutions. And I think that we can honestly jump through, I think you kind of covered the first
idea
three.
Of the free speech.
The lawsuit Seltzer
I would like to show this clip.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. Okay. What's your, the Seltzer, the Seltzer lawsuit feels like one of those sort of like press release dressed up as a lawsuit at one level. At another level, there really has been a worrying trend in the gates opening and judges letting more of these forward. How do you take it?
The suing of a pollster for a poll you didn't like in a field where polls, when done right, have a variation is completely frivolous unless through discovery you find some new consumer fraud plot. Right. They have not yet shown that evidence.
There has been, it's not just Robinson, it's not just Trump. We've seen Elon Musk go after Media Matters with the lawsuit. And I want to be clear here, like we're a little biased because we're reporters, and I generally think the free press is important, and I think the standard for defamation should be high. Also, there are legitimate instances of defamation, and it's important for people not to be defamed and for us to get it right and do our best to get it right. In general, what do you make of this sort of lawsuit fuselage coming from Trump?
Well, one, you're right about the disclosures, so we can be honest with the audience about that. We have an expertise about this as journalists, but we have a view that journalism is a good thing that should flourish and not be stomped out. And you can add to that, I practiced First Amendment law when I used to litigate, so you can...
I mean, so they're saying basically there's a whole onslaught of lawsuits coming for different media networks, and they're all well aware of that. And I think that that's really why the tone of media has already changed. And that already leads us into the clip where Trump is bragging, he's taking a victory lap here, that the media is already being nicer to him this time around. So I can play that one right now.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, you saw those disgusting hogs, Mika Brzezinski and what's his name, the other guy who thinks he's the classic like
Joseph
Democrat used to be Republican kind of guy. That's like just your typical American piece of shit. Going back to like the dough faces of the. It's like you're a modern dough face. Like
modern dough face. Yeah,
die honestly. Like
die.
You're no good. To keep you is no gain, to lose you is no loss. Like
and they've lost a massive amount of their audience too. Whatever. I mean, it's amazing that they had an audience. You have to imagine what kind of audience Other than Joe Biden. I know Joe Biden watched him every morning, but who else was watching them every morning?
Dude, it's like, I love I want to rock through to like so much of the fun stuff you outlined too, and like skip stuff, because it's like, there's so much to be said about like the kind of like ridiculous oligarchy we're seeing fall apart before us. Like that, like Mika Brzezinski we just mentioned is such a good example of this, being the daughter of whatever Zbigniew Brzezinski, who is another world historic piece of shit and deceiver of the American populace.
Up there with Henry Kissinger.
Hitler.
Yeah, up
and
there
there's
with
always
Kissinger,
this layer
Hitler.
to fascism that I was thinking about a lot lately too, where there's this sort of like constant self-deception and scamming of each other that is just an inherent part of it. It's just a key feature.
Yeah, and it's always an inherent part of it is always seeking a better deal, which is why so many of the Nazis fled the ship like rats from a sinking ship. And that's what happened. And most of them weren't punished. Most of them found refuge in other places because of their ability to make deals and their cash that they had stashed away in various places.
Right. So it's like, to hear these people talk always makes me mad. It reminds me of hearing like Colin Powell on MSNBC the day of January 6th. It's like, it's the same, like, it's the same way in like the French Revolution, where it's like it reaches a point of absurdity, where it's like you look at the practices of these people in their day-to-day lives, and history will vindicate us on this, of like the parallels people keep making to the Gilded Age are so fair and so correct and valid. And I want to get into like the crooked demon rats, because they've been up to, I mean, Joe Biden specifically got up to some wild recently, and I was reading your pardons. Yeah, dude, I was reading your outline and thinking to myself, like, it's insane how much
has happened in the last few weeks.
Yeah.
Well, here's the clip of Trump doing the victory lap here. And then we can move forward.
I brought some of our compatriots along with us. They're going to do a beautiful job for you for the next 4 years. And it's really been something very special. And I have to say, Time Magazine getting this honor for the second time, I think I like it better this time, actually. But we did a good job. We had a great first term, despite a lot of turmoil caused unnecessarily. But the media's tamed down a little bit. They're liking us much better now, I think. If they don't, we'll have to just take them on again, and we don't want to do that. But I do want to thank Time Magazine. I've been on the cover many times. I don't know who has the record, but I can only probably talk well about 25% of the covers. 25% are great. The others I just sort of hide. But it's been an honor, and every time it's an honor, I will tell you. And thank you very much for doing it, and thank the whole group at Time.
Yeah, he's God, he really does know how to work a room still, and he's no question dumber, and that's not necessarily less dangerous than someone like Bernie Sanders to me. But I was listening to Bernie Sanders' video after all of this crazy negotiations we're going to talk about too, and just thinking about, like, it is incredible how sharp some of these old guys are compared to Joe Biden, who it is even on your outline.
And not on my outline is the scandal of Biden.
The most recent shit. Yeah, we don't even.
Yeah, like I mean, we can talk about that real quick. I'd like to.
Well,
let's
talk about history and the way that the people like what's his name, Brzezinski, he used to be of the ilk who used to talk about the Soviet Union's gerontocracy, and it's just like, well, what have you wrought, you monsters? What have you wrought on the world, you pieces of shit? So I guess the main line item we should at least get out there is that Joe Biden did pardon his son, and after promising not to, and the Democrats called to pardon Trump. I didn't even know about this, but it's like, I read that and I was like, I mean,
I'll show you that video
I knew they would
the changing tone in liberal media. And also he brought up how the Times has put him on the second time. And if you just compare the two covers, the first one is like ominous with him coming in.
Right.
And this one is much more happy and putting him in almost like an image of like Abraham Lincoln, like an idol sort of situation. And that shows also the so-called liberal media ownership continuing to capitulate to fascism, as they've done historically over and over again. And there's plenty of evidence about that.
Yeah. Abe Lincoln, only cool president. I think that's something.
Only cool Republican president.
Only cool Republican, only cool president, period, full stop. I mean,
FDR is kind of cool.
I'll give FDR a few points. FDR's, close. He's got second place, but fighting a war to end race-based chattel slavery, that's
pretty based
you can say something for that. Yeah, based Lincoln. That hurts to hear. So play that clip.
All right, yeah. So
Jamie,
here's this guy saying, "Pardon Trump."
Do you think that President Biden should pardon Donald Trump? And if so, why?
Yes, I do think so. And I think he should pardon all of those people that have been accused and have been targeted so that we can clean the slate. We can have an air of possibilities for the future. If we keep digging at things of the past, I'm not too sure the country will not lose its way. Now, remember, President Trump has been indicted, has been convicted on state crime. Also, please remember that the United States Supreme Court has given him immunity. And so I'm asking people who question my thought on this to explain to me how he would be any more insulated by this pardon.
That's incredible.
State Representative James Clyburn.
I was going to say that sounded like James Clyburn, that
it is.
Piece of shit. Yeah, a good reminder that, a person's identity does not precede them from buying into this evil project.
That's
piece
true.
Of what a fascinating way to put it, too, that, look, we already can't touch him. We might as well just play nice. It's like,
might as
brother,
well just roll over.
That is loser talk. You fucking losers. Holy shit, dude. Okay.
I know the intruder's in the house, but if we handcuff ourselves to the bed, I think he's really gonna.
I'm not. You take whatever you need, sir. We'll get you on the next robbery. Dude, okay. I need to know what Trump breaking his silence on the CEO shooting is, too, because I have been I've been in my head what the is he?
We're almost there.
I know.
There's Van Jones, too, also, which is a really similar tone. And then I don't have this clip, but also it's worth mentioning that Charles Barkley, too, also said a very similar thing to this, which is just that Democrats look stupid right now, and that's why we should bend over
that's
to
true.
Trump.
Right. They do look dumb as shit, and it's an incredibly meek time for the Democratic Party. Which
absolutely.
There's a level to which that's obviously vindicating, but also you ass. You really acted like you put everything into this. You wasted every possible resource you could. Anyway, play that clip.
All right.
Everybody keeps. The problem is you have a framework in your mind that how can Donald Trump? Guys, can we cut it out? Donald Trump is not an idiot. Donald Trump, let me just be very clear. Donald Trump is smarter than me, you, and all critics. You know how we know? Because he has the White House, the Senate, the House.
Totally agree.
Court, the popular vote. He has a massive media ecosystem bigger than the mainstream built around him and for him, and a religious fervor in a political movement around him. And his best buddy is the richest person in the history of the world, and the most relevant Kennedy is with him. This dude is a phenomenon. He is the most powerful human on earth and in our lifetime. And we're still saying, well, how is this guy? We look like idiots to ordinary.
You're totally right.
That's
I definitely agree that Trump is smarter than a lot of these people, but
he's look at this giant fascist machine, this giant fascist project that's been culminating.
If you can't beat him, join him.
Let's just surrender.
Right. Because the scary thing is too that a lot of that is just facts, and it is awful to hear it laid out like that. But he's right that, like we said, the same Republican Party that killed 1 million people in Iraq just to sort of keep the line going up. Yeah, that same Republican Party, and worse in a lot of ways too. Those people are running the fucking tables right now, and it is something we saw happen in front of us. But my God, it's like we've seen this coming for decades, and the Democrats have been there being like, "They were the only ones who could stop this." And turns out, on every single layer, they were as wrong as they could possibly be. And now we're here with the tab. So
yeah, and one thing
really
I
awesome.
absolutely hate is their new strategy of continuing to send text all year round. Apparently, they're just not going to stop sending texts after the election cycle is over this time. And it's some of the most pathetic stuff I've ever seen, like the Stop Kings Act and all sorts of these very desperate petition attempts. And it's like,
right.
You're coming at me with a petition right now. You lost the House, you lost the Senate, you lost the presidency, the popular
People would
vote.
rather gamble that money on sports that you allowed that whole legal framework to come into existence too.
Get the out of people's hair. Get out of people's hair. That's the best thing you could do right now.
Right. And
stop texting people.
It's so worth remembering that Elon Musk is absolutely a product. Elon Musk's political existence did not start with the Republican Party at all. In fact, he was the visionary project of the Obama administration, and that's where Tesla
a
got
darling
its
of
footing
Obama
in the door. Yes, this was not an accident at all, and he's not coming out of nowhere. They built this whole thing too from the jump.
Yep.
And I mean, okay, so you got to tell me what the
remember the whole why I left the left, all the memes he was sharing.
Yeah.
Probably a year or two ago in the Trump election, lead up to Trump election.
Angrily pointed out to me recently that he's basically just a Dutchman, a colonial Dutchman guy reincarnate into our society, and that made me mad.
Absolutely
and,
true.
It's so true. He's so. When people talk about hating the Dutch, think of the Elon Musk, and that's exactly what they're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, they did resurrect the slave trade in Europe,
right, dude? And everything that's been going on in Indonesia and New Guinea, all that has to do with it, but. You gotta tell me what Trump's line has been on the CEO
shoot,
because I'm dying.
Here we go.
Well, I think it's terrible. Suspected shooter. Does that tell you anything about how I think it's a terrible thing. I think it's really terrible that some people seem to admire him, like him. And I was happy to see that it wasn't specific to this gentleman that was killed. It's just an overall sickness as opposed to a specific sickness.
An overall sickness. It sounds a lot like the Gilded Age, actually. Very, very much like the.
It's so strange.
The social sickness,
I
essentially, that vexed America during the Gilded Age. And it was rife with these assassinations. And as you said before, that's really where the idea of the propaganda of the deed first emerged.
Right. And there is the real sense to which that's a great reminder that Trump isn't, for all the threats he is, I would say Elon Musk is much closer to the Hitlerian figure we're all afraid of in a lot of senses, because of his ambition and shrewdness. And a lot of I thought we were going to be done hearing about that dude after he bought Twitter at a certain point. I was like, okay, this is such an incredibly bad deal. There's just no way that someone can really leverage this into some better position. And here we are he has accomplished that unequivocally. Yeah. And
it's worth mentioning too. I don't think we've brought it up so far, but there's been a bit of investigations now after the election. And it shows, as everyone expected, that he went full force into helping Donald Trump in every way possible on Twitter. Essentially just completely minimizing any type of Kamala endorsement and only promoting the Trump endorsement stuff in a very, very ham-fisted, over-the-top way, just driving the algorithm in a way that has since caught the attention of people who do those sorts of investigations.
Yeah, I mean, why wouldn't he? It's of course. And again, it's the reason I say
and that's
that
why
now
he bought
about
it.
Trump,
I guess he thinks it was a good business investment, even though he blew up billions of dollars.
Yeah, well, and the reason I say that about Trump now, after hearing that line about the CEO shooting, is basically that that's just not. I mean, I feel like a more competent fascist could find a way to leverage that better to their advantage, but that's a very confusing and kind of muddled, which is just how he is sometimes. And I don't think
at this point, he's not a very competent fascist. He just has a huge group behind him now. Basically,
much more competent and ambitious fascists, and that is
the Project
just kind of
2025 group is really
which
running.
We're gonna get.
Musk.
Okay, the CNN host, is that the guy with like all blonde hair, who, like a bald head, who looks like a thumb kind of thing, that was like mad, like that has like a podcast or something? He's like, when I was talking to people, is that guy? Because I think I might have seen this clip already.
Yeah. Guy does look like a thumb.
We're skipping this. I don't want to hear this guy again. I've heard this so many times. It's such poison.
He demands a monument built in New York City for the slain CEO.
Yeah. We can cut this down without airing this piece of voice, which is that like that all the horse shits who are out there equivocating the idea that like this Brian Thompson deserves some sort of extra special treatment for being gunned down like a dog because he was too greedy to be comparable with human life, and he just needs to be, either reforming his ways or eliminated, and someone chose to eliminate him, and that's what it is. But I don't need to be grieving about that until he atones for his crimes or the organization he's a part of is gone from this earth. And he's not equivalent to George Floyd. He's not equivalent to like your grandmother who died because of something that maybe some other company did. But you know what I want to touch on? The number of times in the media that they bring up like the fact that like, oh, Luigi Mangione didn't even have United Healthcare, as if it's some sort of evidence that he's insane.
Yeah, it's like a hypocrisy bait.
Yeah, they keep walking that out there like it's supposed to have the effect of being like, I mean, don't you see how crazy that is?
Yeah, and the same with how he was rich. They bring up that he's from an affluent family.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. Right. And it's like, you people have no idea how you really can't tell what this looks like. You really can't see yourselves in a mirror doing this and understand that like this is repulsive morally and so easy. And like, being in I understand like people have jobs and stuff, but like, good God, it's like, how do you get in the position where you're in the mainstream media on TV making an argument like that, and then you go home and it's no wonder these people are
so much
insane.
of it is tone deaf when they don't understand the undeniable, palpable anger over the health insurance industry in this moment. That they have to pretend to deny that anger or to delegitimize it. And they're doing, again, all sorts of things to essentially scare people away from having that position. Like the lady in Florida with the last name Boston.
Yes. Oh my God. That's not even on here too. We gotta mention that.
On health, she said to a healthcare provider who denied her coverage, she said something like, "You people are next. Delayed, denied."
She said, "You people are
deposed."
next.
Yeah. And
popped off.
She popped off. She was upset in a moment where she's being denied life-saving health insurance. I'm sure.
Mother of two. Doesn't own a gun.
Mother of two. Yep.
Got put up on $100,000 bail because of the current climate and the charges they're hitting her for. She could end up with 15 years in prison.
15 years in prison, which is extremely excessive. But they know it's excessive, and it's meant to send a tone of fear, essentially, throughout the culture.
Yeah. Dude, it feels like an era of terror. Like, I've never felt more terrorized in my life. I truly never have felt more terrorized.
And then I've never seen the dynamic be so at display on the news that the pundits and their comfortability from being separated by typically millions of dollars in terms of their income. They're so shielded from life from the average person in this country that they have this tone-deaf response that really is extremely resembling of the Marie Antoinette "well, let them eat cake" moment. And I think one of the funniest moments we have was on Fox with Laura Ingraham. I think this would be the perfect moment to bring up this video.
Right. I want to do the Barry Weiss one too. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw this one. This just stunning display.
No,
of
I didn't.
hypocrisy.
I've heard the Barry Weiss one already too. So let's do Laura Ingraham. She's always a hoot.
This is crazy.
We'll dig into it later. The Instagram posts from nutbag people, which I was sent in the commercial break earlier, crazy. Like, he's cute, and people celebrating this. This is a sickness. Honestly, it's so disappointing, but I guess we shouldn't be surprised. Gentlemen, thank you so much. And up next, the other big news out of New York, Daniel Penny. A lot of people think he's a hero. And tonight, he's not guilty. My take next.
Dear God. Dear God.
That moment went viral. And people are saying, like, the producer must have sabotaged her. Like, there's no possible way that they could have a turnaround that prepared. There is like a whoosh sound effect as she pivots to the next segment, the Daniel Penny segment. Like, those are two prepared segments next to each other.
Yeah, and the New York Post had them on the same headline. I mean, it's just the fact that those things are happening at around the same time. And there's like so many other right-wing shooters you can walk out. You can talk about Kyle Rittenhouse. You can talk about Daniel Perry over in Texas. There's no shortage of these creeps that all of these assholes have been so comfortable sitting up there and equivocating about. Also equivocating about the lives of 1 million Iraqi people, and then also equivocating about the lives of people in Palestine and the 500,000 or so odd people have probably been murdered in the past year or so. So that is some shit. It's like all of a sudden now this is the political violence. This is the violence that is political, and it's not okay. And I want to segue that into Bari Weiss, because Bari Weiss, I mean, her whole the thing that you got to remember when you listen to this person is her whole career started with silencing other students on campus because they were pro-Palestine, and then being like that being a threat to her safety on campus, and basically like all these like she's one of these freaks crowing about like, you know, identity politics and DEI now, but that is how her career started, was silencing other people, using her identity as a cudgel to be on the wrong side of an issue that there is an unequivocal moral right side. So let's hear what she has to say
silencing
now about
protesters. Silencing protesters about and calling them Hamas supporters.
Yeah,
and
after
things like
a year of calling protesters Hamas because of their willingness to stand up to what's obviously going on in Israel. So let's hear what she has to say about Luigi, the boy.
Well, I think one thing that's important to keep in mind, and that Charles Layman writes about in that piece that you just cited, is to kind of remind people that this killing of Brian Thompson is part of a pattern of normalized political violence over the past decade or so. You have Steve Scalise, the attempted assassination. You have Gabby Giffords. You have the violent rioting of the BLM summer that was normalized as fiery but mostly peaceful, unforgettably, by CNN. You have, of course, January 6th. You have the pro-Hamas riots.
The only example she uses is January 6th, and they're all going to be pardoned, as we know, coming into this administration.
Unforgettable.
Notice how she does not mention a single example of right-wing violence, like you were saying, Kyle Rittenhouse, Daniel Penny, doesn't mention any of those.
Perry.
The Miami shooter who shot up the gay nightclub. Like, countless examples of these guys with right-wing manifestos saying, I did it because I hate immigrants. She doesn't bring that up. It's only the left-wing violence that's unacceptable.
And it's because fascism cannot accept the truth of social violence, and that's just the reality of they cannot accept the idea that that evicting someone and that causing them to be homeless can be a form of violence. They can't accept the fact that letting people go hungry and throwing food in the dumpster because it would lower the price
and then
violence.
Arming the dumpsters so that people can't get the food from the dumpsters.
They can't accept
that's not violence.
That's violence. Yeah, like that is violence, unfortunately. Violence is a very complicated thing. It's not just when someone guns down some piece of shit. That actually can be a good thing in the grand scheme.
It can be a response to systemic violence or social violence, like you're saying.
And I wanted to drop that point as a segue into the next point about fascism's history of equating both sides or just endorsing fascist violence. So it's like that both sidesing thing is just such a consistent historic theme, and it goes like so into the anti-Semitism and grievance that they still feel in Germany now too, with this just happened with the AfD and all. It's a little too complex to get into, but like the situation devolving in Europe right now too is terrifying as well, because between the Syria conflict and this attack that just happened very recently in Germany, they're like the AfD is surging, and Elon Musk endorsed them too. So it's like it's all one team. It's all one team ultimately.
They have
even if they have their internal conflicts. So I don't know if you got another clip loomed up before we guys really dig into Elon Musk, because he's mostly what we have to deal with now.
No, unless we want to talk about Bernie, or I think there is a little bit left on this Barry Weiss clip that we can keep rolling, actually.
Please. Put that in my veins.
You have protests regularly now at the homes of Supreme Court justices. You have even people like a liberal museum curator in Brooklyn whose apartment building was targeted and attacked. Why? Because she's Jewish and therefore a Zionist and therefore unacceptable. My point is that we have normalized an ideology that suggests that certain people, because of their identity, because of their jobs, or because of their political outlook, are somehow ripe and, in fact, justifiable targets for violence. The very same group of people, Bill and Dana, who like to tell us that silence is violence, are going out and justifying the cold-blooded murder of a father of two. Mm-hmm. How is that? How do you comport? How does that comport? How do you make sense of that?
No mention also of Paul Pelosi's being attacked by a crazy right-winger also.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was just going to say, like, the way that these people turn anti-Semitism into this absolutely meaningless term makes me sick, because so many of the real violence we're talking about from these right-wing shooters, like, it comes from a very anti-Semitic place. There are very real, like, anti-Semitic strains throughout American Christianity that are not a joke and are a big part of why they're okay with supporting Israel as a genocidal project. And it's something that I think can be resolved and recuperated in a one-state solution, but that's going to be something that requires I don't know, people like this to shut the up and learn to
be censored, to be literally
censored,
like
literally, so like you can't be this. You can't call people calling to end a genocide rioters because
what's disturbing is she's speaking of like a reverse world, essentially.
Yeah.
Like she's literally saying like, oh, the people showing up at college campuses hurting other people's feelings. That's equivalent to the side that's bombing children and blowing up hospitals intentionally and countless other war crimes and being indicted for war crimes.
Yeah. And we're funding all of this directly and they cannot do it without us. And I think it's really got to be said too that like it's kind of a lib point, but in the grand scheme of American campus protests, which do like there is a bit of a, you know, if there's a place where there's any kind of, you know, good protest history in America, it's a double-edged sword. But the protesting we saw throughout the years, and it's still going on, it's not over, but this has been a very tame protest movement in the grand scheme of things. And part of that just comes from the understanding in the Palestinian community that they're going to be first on the list for suppression, and they have to have really good messaging discipline overall, or else there is going to be backlash just like this. They're going to be turned into a sort of both sides sort of thing. So
another major legal development as we talk about the media being threatened of being sued is that anyone involved in a protest seen as an organizer, the Supreme Court has ruled recently, I believe, or at least high courts. I'm not entirely sure if it's the Supreme Court, but basically the changing dynamic in the court is that they're going to start holding protesters accountable for legal liabilities during protests. And what does that mean? Well, it could mean even like traffic is late and a TV show doesn't get on the air. Maybe you can sue the protest organization. So that makes people very hesitant, we'll say, to protest.
Right.
Is that a First Amendment violation? Well, it depends on what the Supreme Court says, right?
Yeah. I mean, it has been a complete, you know, like devastating blow to organized crime in America in some senses of the word, even though it's like, look, I get constant sportsbook ads on my phone now too. So it's like, is the mafia really gone? But like
legalized sports betting is just like out of control now.
Right. And the point I'm trying to make is that like RICO law and the ability of the legal mandate of the state to be able to dismantle organizations off of like very tenuous associations and basically the ability of the state to persecute members of organizations off of relatively tenuous connectivity is a really powerful. It's a power of state persecution that exists and has existed, and I think it just hasn't been as muscular in the United States for a very long time, and now it's pretty powerful, even if it's still very disparate.
For the reason of that, it's that central denial at the heart of the American project of denying what the purpose of a state is, like we talked about at the beginning of the show.
Right.
That essentially the power was there the whole time for all the mechanisms of the state, like you said, to crack down with RICO, or for the executive branch to work in tandem with the legislative and judicial branch. And that's what an organized state is going to do in the end once it actually coalesces into its higher stage, whatever that was supposed to be. Right. And that really was the political battle going on underneath the soft political battle that we talked about at the ballot. Underneath it, I think, was this really binary choice of what kind of society we're going to be. And the question always came down to socialism or fascism.
So the last thing I want to say is, like, I've been thinking a lot about organizational units of reaction and where reaction goes to, like, organize. And the judiciary has always, like, wherever you go in history, the judiciary is just a place where dogma is built and reaction breeds, and is a place where, like, it has an important necessary state utility, but they become very, like, dangerous privileged positions. And I've been thinking about that a lot. And then I've also been thinking about, like, okay, where else does reaction go to breed in the U.S. and, like, organize itself and create power structures? And the world of charity, I realized, is so crucial in that too. The whole 501(c) ecosystem and all, like, the tax-free organizations based around religion and ideology that center their work on charity. But the reality of charitable organizations in America, and this is something I've had a very privileged view on, is that they're more or less there as, like, a fund in which for people to, like, organize around. It's more about the jobs and the people doing the jobs and the galas and the events and all of that kind of stuff than it ever is about the actual work, the charitable work getting done. And that's always true to varying degrees with different charitable organizations. But a huge, huge, huge part of that is just people spending money on nice events and having nice jobs and getting organized on certain issues in particular. And religion connects to this through Christianity and the abortion issues and, like, homeschooling and all of these kind of things that, like, get sold as, you know, ways to help people. But
they're different interest groups, essentially, that form. And some of them lobby the government, and some aren't for that purpose of lobbying the government. Some are truly in the private space. But yeah, others, I think the super PAC also kind of evolves from that. It just sort of branches off of how we treat, like, a 501(c)(3) corporation. And it really legally evolved from that, and is this trough where essentially you can put money if you agree on a certain thing. And that thing could just be an agreement on low taxes in general, or it could be support for something like the RNC.
Exactly.
Yeah, all kinds of ways of basically organizing donor money amongst people who have money to spare.
Yeah, and I want to, I mean, we're limited on time, so, I mean, we already said Bernie would have won. I think we can skip all that. I want to hit everything about Elon Musk that's going on recently as much as we can, because that has been insane to watch and think is worth covering. And then if we have time for the opinion poll, we'll get to that. But give me your, I think I know what has happened with this Elon Musk kiboshing this budget deal thing, but I know part of it has to do with his own business interests. But give me your read on the situation.
Yeah, I, to be honest, haven't read too much into it, but just hearing the general news cycle, what I've heard is, like you said, that Elon Musk has his own business interests, and people are speculating that it has to do with his interests in China. Essentially, what we're seeing is a conflict of interest forming within within the one party, the Republican Party.
I think I've got to go, but we'll sign it off. This is a good roundup on a lot of things. Yeah, and it's more government shutdown bullshit. We've seen it a million times. The only interesting part to me is that it has Musk has big dicked Trump like day one, and
Absolutely,
it's going to be right. And we all
it's
know
like
that,
a conflict of interest between Musk and Trump that's forming within their incoming administration.
And what destroys the fascists is that they're all a bunch of individual, self-interested individuals, and their interests conflict at some point, and they have no way to account for that. So
exactly,
it's happening very quickly. We'll see how that rolls out, but yeah, I mean, we had to do a little roundup because there was so much so, and there's still so much more.
Update.
We barely talked Luigi, but I mean, there's definitely more to be said on the whole Luigi case too as it develops. But yeah, free him. He didn't do it, and I guess that's it was a patsy, you know. So all right, signing off. It's a good one, dude. If you're listening, give us money on the Patreon, and you'll get to hear all of our bad takes from the past and then some. So yeah, you have a good evening, my dude. Merry Christmas to everybody, and stay safe.
Everyone.
Keep the bunker well stocked and warm.
We don't hide like the means, so we settle for them greens. Yeah, I'm high like the trees. When I send it to my knees, I don't sway with the breeze. They can't send me to my knees, yeah.